China has gone full-blown Kendrick Lamar when it comes to this trade war. I love it. See, the president thought he was doing something by raising these tariffs. He thought he was really convincing people that China wasn't coming to the table. But in reality, he's been behind closed doors calling them over and over, trying to get some sort of deal done. And they haven't been answering him. In response to all of his nonsense, they've been making TikToks that have been flooding everybody's For You page, mine included, exposing all of the luxury brands that are made in China, exposing everything that's made in China. And not only that, to do one better, they are telling people you can buy it straight from the factory. On top of that, I've been getting the dude who does the Trump impression all over my social media too. I love that dude. Plus, I don't know about y'all, but I done went and reopened my Red Note account because I'm trying to learn the language again. For the record, the next time I get a Trumper or a MAGA person in my comments who says, if you like China so much, why don't you go there? If you like China so much, why don't you go there? I'm going to go. Do not threaten me with a good time, all right? Because they got it all figured out. I know the president is doing this by accident, but somehow just his presence alone is strengthening the relationship between American citizens and Chinese citizens. They keep trying to make this country the boogeyman, and they fail every single time. It's hilarious. Hey man, Mr. President, go ahead and call off all them tariffs, man. You ain't got it. You ain't got another diss track in you, okay? It's over.
When it comes to the USA, we have never had the upper hand over China. Let's talk about how China has just executed the longest hustle in modern history. For decades, we have been conditioned to believe that China is just one giant sweatshop pumping out crap while we are the sophisticated, high-end innovators. And it turns out China has just been patiently waiting for us to be completely dependent upon their manufacturers. They have been mastering every technology, absorbing every industry, and then building an empire that doesn't need us half as much as we need them. And just when Trump thought he was going to flex up on China with his tariffs and trade war, they bitch slapped us right back with transparency. People forget that TikTok is owned by China, so it's not a surprise that every other video right now on your FYP is a Chinese person exposing the insane amount of markup that we pay for the products that they make for pennies on the dollar. Luxury handbags that are going for $3,000 to $5,000 in the United States are now being sold directly from manufacturers in China for $100 to $150. Premium skincare and perfumes are repackaged and sold for 10 times the price. China hasn't even had to fight in this trade war. They literally just drop the receipts and let Americans wake up and say, oh my God, we have been duped. China's domestic market is operating faster, more efficiently, better, and cheaper with products and things that we invented, from EVs to AI. They have a high-speed rail system that makes our Amtrak look like a horse-drawn carriage. Their cities are so high-tech and high-end, they put our crumbling infrastructure to absolute shame. So after decades of the U.S. media painting China as some dystopian sweatshop, Americans are waking up. Chinese consumers get better deals than we do. Chinese technology is significantly more advanced than ours. Chinese manufacturing isn't inferior, it's just that the United States chooses to sell us overpriced garbage. So now, instead of fearing the Chinese people and that country like we've always been conditioned to, we are now cheering them on while they expose the rot inside of our own system. China didn't destroy American capitalism. They held up a mirror to it and let it destroy itself.
Today, the Pentagon released more than a dozen videos showing Chinese fighter jets harassing U.S. military planes in international airspace. The U.S. says Chinese aircraft flew as close as 15 feet from American planes, accusing China of risky and reckless maneuvers. The Pentagon says this has happened 180 times since 2021, and that is more than the total over the previous decade.
I know that China is doing very poorly right now.
They're not doing poorly, trust. Australia now handles the beef, Canada the oil, Brazil the soya beans, France the aircraft, and have you heard they're investing in electric cars from Germany and tech from South Korea? That's not crumbling. That's strategy. The global system is shifting. China can buy anything that the U.S. sells from another country. However, the U.S. heavily relies on China for things like antibiotics, medical equipment, electronics, rare earth elements, solar panels, batteries, clothing, toys, furniture. I call that leverage. This plan is just not feasible. You don't have the factories, supply chain, global support, and even with billions of dollars in funding, it'll take at least 10 years to separate from China. And in the meantime, empty shelves and increased prices for the citizens of the United States. That's a good job. That's a great job. I don't get it.
Did you see that China trolled the US by making AI video of us being really fat and working in factories?
What's up, beautiful people? So today we're gonna react to the whole saga of America-China. You know, it happened sometimes back.
When I thought that maybe we were going to have a good relationship with the Chinese after the big red note thing and Americans got to see how great Chinese people are and how nice they are, here we are basically being made fun of on social media and tensions couldn't be any higher. And it's so funny because I made a video about the red note thing and it was pretty big and I mentioned that, hey, maybe from now on we'll have a better relationship, but seeing that this world's so broken, probably not. And here we are. And here's the probably not. And there's a lot of different opinions about the video. Some people are offended by it, saying like, hey, there's nothing wrong with manufacturing work or factory work. And other people just absolutely agree with it. What do you guys think in the comments? Let me know.
How far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit and loss of jobs for the American worker? And how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo. As I mentioned, it's about jobs, proliferation, and human rights. And there are those who say we shouldn't link human rights and trade and proliferation and trade. I disagree. But if we just want to take up this issue on the basis of economics alone, indeed, China should not receive most favored nation status for several reasons that I'd like to go into now. I'd like to call the attention of our colleagues to this chart on the status quo that the business community is asking each and every one of us to endorse today. Right now, we have a $34 billion trade deficit with China, the 1995 figure. It will be over $40 billion for 1996. Since the Tiananmen Square massacre, this figure has increased 1,000%, from $3.5 billion then to about $34 billion now. In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal? On exports, China only allows certain industries into China, of U.S. Industries into China, and therefore only 2% of U.S. exports are allowed into China. On the other hand, the U.S. allows China to flood our markets with a third of their exports, and that'll probably go over 40%. And it's limitless because we have not placed any restriction. In terms of jobs, this is the biggest and cruelest hoax of all. Not only do we not have market access, not only do they have prohibitive tariffs, not only are our exports not let in very specifically, but China benefits with at least 10 million jobs from U.S. China trade. The president in his statement requesting this special waiver said that China trade supports 170,000 jobs in the United States, 170,000 jobs, whereas our imports from China support 10 million jobs at least. Fact is that U.S. China trade is a job loser. And one of the reasons that it is because well, first let me just make another point, and that is that our colleagues on the other side of this issue will say the trade with China, exports to China have increased 3 times in the last 10 years. They have. But they fail to mention that imports from China have increased 11 times, thereby leading to this huge trade deficit. The other issue, in addition, if intellectual property is a $2 billion, $3 billion loss, technology transfer is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. If you want to sell to China, your products into China, the Chinese insist that you open a factory there. They misappropriate your technology, open factories of their own, and then say to you, now we want to see your plan for export. That's as simply as I can say it briefly. But the fact is, this isn't about products made in America. The Chinese want American products that are made in China. And the most serious of these transfers of technology are in the airline industry, where Boeing tail sections of the Boeing 737s were mostly made in Wichita, Kansas. Now they are made in Shen province, where workers make $50 a month. And the transfer of the technology and the transfer of the jobs has taken place. General Motors, Ford, they're all fighting to get in to build factories there so they can make parts there. They want MFN so they can get those parts back into the United States. So we are exporting not low-tech jobs and textile jobs. We're exporting our technology. Now, if you take a country the size of China with the very cheap, and in some instances, slave labor, the lack of market access, the rip-off of our intellectual property, the transfer of technology, a country that is not willing to play by the rules in any respect in this trade relationship, you have a serious threat not only to our relationship, but to the industrialized world. And if there's one message that I want our colleagues to understand today and our constituents is that on this day, your member of Congress could have drawn the line to say to the President of the United States, do something about this U.S. China trade relationship that is a job loser for the United States. And this brings us to the point that others have said, well, we can't isolate China. Do you think for 1 minute that with 10 million jobs at least and $35 billion and be over $40 billion this year in a trade surplus, all those billions of dollars in surplus, that the Chinese are going to walk away? Where are they going to take 35 to 40% of their exports? Who's going to buy them? This is what sustains the regime. The funding and the jobs. They can't have those people out of work. They have to be at work exporting to the United States.
I feel very sorry for the Americans. They do not need to see their living standards being ripped off, being eroded by all these tariffs, declared by Trump being paid by foreign countries, but actually paid by the good-natured, kind-hearted American people. Mr. Donald Trump is the way he's slapping such exorbitant global tariff against so many countries, foes and non-foes, friends and non-friends alike, is terrible. He doesn't know what he's really doing. He probably never went to a grocery store. He never really understands the plight and the fact that most of the Americans don't have cash reserves, for example. They don't have savings. They live from paycheck to paycheck. He doesn't care for all the economic losses he is causing. He doesn't care if many companies, many factories throughout the world will be closed because of this global tariff war.
So the U.S.-China trade relationship is one of the most complex and consequential in the global economy. Despite effort to reduce reliance on foreign manufacturing, China remains a critical source of widely variety of products that are used in USA. At the same time, the US has made strides toward actually manufacturing independence. How effective has this tariff been, and where does the US stand today? Let's dive into the facts. So we all expected when the Liberation Day was announced, or when the Trump took over the office, he actually highlighted the American First policy. So we all expected that American manufacturing industry actually will rise against the global expected scale. But it's almost 6 months later. I don't know if there are changes or actually nothing has actually happened. So China's roles in global manufacturing powers is undeniable, and it's why it remains the US best option for a variety of products. One factor that makes China's outstand is the unmatched scale and efficiency. China produces nearly 45% of global manufacturing output, dominating industries like electronic, textile, consumer goods. So its vast network of factories, skilled labor, and streamlined chains allow for rapid production at low cost. For example, 99% of consumer fireworks and 75% of professional fireworks in the USA actually come from China. No other country matches this scale. Another thing that makes China stand out is the critical supply chain. So China controls supply chains of products like smartphones and computers and semiconductors. We've seen one of the interviews where actually one of the Microsoft directors was asked, like, not Microsoft but HP, like, it means that the chips that are used in HP laptop actually comes from China. So he was asking, how safe are we? Is it that can China still track those chips that they made? Can China still trace or track a vital, like, key information, for example, from the U.S. defense? The fact that China, when there was a tariff war between the United States and China, Trump exempted Chinese electronics from the tariffs because he understood how crucial these products are to the American life. So rare earth minerals are another area where China has dominance, recently reinforced by export bans, which creates resilience. Another one is diverse product range. China produces many things on a large scale, and this diverse way of production actually makes it the best option, like no other option that US has. So from toys to solar panels, China offers breadth of product that no other nation can comprehend. China produces products that other nations struggle to replicate. Even as US seek alternatives, countries like Vietnam or Mexico lack the capacity to replace China fully. So US thinks, okay, we've seen the AI mocker videos where the Chinese were trying to mock American manufacturing industries, and these products are actually very essential to many of the American lifestyle. So even if United States move from China, and go and produce and go and source from other countries, it's very difficult for actually those countries to match. A reason why Donald Trump actually introduced the tariff is to actually try to make American be independent, to be dependent on actually, or independent in manufacturing sectors. So months have come. Is there any effect? Has there been effect? Have we seen any change in American manufacturing industry? So let's start. US has long sought to reduce the dependence on foreign manufacturing, particularly from China, which is proving to be difficult year in, year out. There were legislative investments like the Biden administration policies like the CHIPS and Science Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. spurred nearly 1 trillion. 1 trillion in private sector, invested in U.S. manufacturing, creating around 800,000 new jobs. This investment focused on semiconductors, clean energy, and critical minerals, aiming to rebuild domestic capacity. And also there are other ways like the reshoring trends. So in 2024, a study noted that Trump's first-term tariff led to some reshoring in industries like steel and manufacturing, with companies like GM announcing 4 billion shift to USA factories. However, the progress has been low. Manufacturing still accounts for just 11% of US GDP, down from historical highs. And you'll know when the tariffs were in, many people or many products didn't come to America. And this thing created chaos actually around American factories, And there are things like the supply chain diversification. So the US is exploring friendshoring with allies like Japan and the EU to secure critical components such as semiconductors from Taiwan, which were excluded from the Trump tariffs. The effort to develop domestic sources of rare earth metals, like the mountain pass mine, are underway, but could take years. So we all know that these are Trump's dream of actually American first thing, American independence, or it's still, it will take a lot of time to actually realize its effect, So despite gains, the US faces hurdles building new supply chain, and it's costly and often double more than current cost. And automation limit job creation in capital-intensive industries like steels. So this is where we saw the Chinese actually mock the Americans because, it's a lazy working economy. So the loss of 5 million manufacturing jobs since 1997 underscored the long road ahead, So when automation, it means many jobs are being lost, like in April 2nd, the Liberation Day, where Trump actually imposed the 10 baseline tariff on imports and 34 reciprocal tariff on China, which later escalated and settled for 145%, which went for almost a month actually. And then there was renegotiation and it was dropped down to 30%. Was the goal achieved? What was the goal? The goal was to boost U.S. manufacturing industry, reduce trade deficits, and address issues like fentanyl smugglings, But let's evaluate the impact of all this, One, economic costs. The consumer prices, a tariff increased cost for the U.S. household by an estimate of about $1,200 to $5,200 annually, raising the price of goods like cars up to $300,000 more, and groceries. Retailers like Adidas and Mattel passed on the cost to consumers, hitting hard. There are retailers, stores like it was Target, which actually also, passed the price to consumers, and he ended up actually accepting the fact that the Americans who are gonna pay for these taxes, There was retaliation from China, which was 125%, and rare earth export ban, disrupted U.S. industries like aerospace and tech. Other nations like Canada and Mexico imposed their own tariffs targeting U.S. imports like fuel and agriculture, which actually, it costed a lot of Americans, and I think they are still actually talking about it. There was manufacturing gain, so some rationing occurred with companies like GM investing in US factories. There was a 2023 report that found that Trump's first-term tariff stimulated US production. This is his first term actually. Stimulated trade, US production in tariff goods and with minimal price import. However, the CNBC survey showed that tariffs are likely to spark manufacturing boom as companies find it cheaper to relocate to low tariff countries like Vietnam rather than USA. So when Trump decided, okay, I'm gonna impose tariffs on China so that these factories come from China back to the United States of America. But what did happen is that these countries moved, or these companies moved to countries that there were low actually tariffs, and all this saga, it has caused a trade deficit in USA. So US trade deficit in 2024 it exceeded 1.2 trillion, and also tariff prompted a 41.3 surge in import, as farms stockpile goods undermine deficit reduction, So where there was, negotiation there to reduce tariffs, US lowered the tariff to 30%, it means that the tariff acted as leverage, but it didn't resolve trade imbalance. Actually, it really didn't, achieve the main intended purpose, So tell me what you think about this video.